One of the more difficult concepts to understand, and definitely the most difficult to teach, is the inyan that Yosef HaTzadik had to spend another 2 years in prison because he asked the Sar HaMashkim to help him. The obvious question, the Rebbeinu Shalom did put us into a world where we are supposed to try to fend for ourselves. Of course, our bitachon has to be in the Rebbeinu Shalom. Ultimately, we have to know that without the Rebbeinu Shalom helping us, we're going to get nowhere. But the Rebbeinu Shalom still wants us to take the initiative on our own, doesn't he? Well, there are many different pshatim. I would like to share with you a beautiful mahalach over here from the Sefer Shem Mishmuel. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Shabbos, Ner Chanukah Mismael, Ner Chanukah is on the left side, and Mezuzah Miyamin, Mezuzah is on the right side. And the inyan is that Mezuzah is a shmira l'bayis, so that various different koichos, chitzonim, and mazikim don't enter the house. When the Roman Caesar heard that Onkelos became a ger, and he sent soldiers to try to arrest him, so the first group of soldiers got into a conversation with him. He convinced them to be Megayah themselves. With the second group of soldiers, being that they were under orders not to discuss any musar or hishkafa in Yana Onkelos, he began to discuss with them simply military policies and so on, and that led to Onkelos being Megayah them. When the third group of soldiers came around, the Caesar warned them not to talk to anyone. And the Gemara tells us, when Onkelos walked out, he put his hands on the mezuzah, and they asked him, "What's this?" He began to explain that by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's the opposite of the way it is with the Umas Ha'olam. With the Umas Ha'olam, the general sits behind his huge, big desk, together with other generals, parties, drinks, orders his dinner, and then turns around to a map, and they take some darts and they stick it into the map, and they decide these soldiers go here and get killed over there, and those soldiers go up there and get killed over here. And they, of course, make it their business to stay out of harm's way. But by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Onkelos explained the Roman soldiers, it's different. HaKadosh Baruch Hu situates things so that Avodav may bifnim, v'hu mishamron may b'chutz, and that's the mezuzah on the outside. And the soldiers went and they were Megayah themselves as well. The Roman Caesar, seeing already that he lost 3 battalions of soldiers trying to arrest Onkelos, decided that it was enough before he would have the entire Roman army becoming Bali Tshuva. Now I once heard a pshat that obviously when Onkelos put his hand over the mezuzah, the soldiers felt something over here. In other words, if a group of soldiers would break into someone's house, soldiers from any country, and that person would put his hand over the mezuzah, and even if he would get a chance to tell them this nice marshal about the generals, it's still hardly likely those soldiers will just give everything up and be Megayah themselves. So something more happened over here. When these soldiers entered Onkelos' house, they felt a change. They felt a certain sense of Kedusha. When they stepped out of the house, they lost it. And Onkelos pointed to the mezuzah and explained to them how the mezuzah protects the interior of the Jewish home from certain alien influences, and therefore you can be Zaycha. Even you soldiers were able to feel the difference. That feeling was strong enough to entice them to be Megayah themselves. So the mezuzah in every Jewish home is supposed to be on the right side. Of course, which way is the right? It depends which direction you're standing. And the answer is, mezuzah is supposed to be on the right side coming in, derech diyaska. Entering from outside in, the mezuzah goes on the right side. Ner Chanukah, on the other hand, is on the left side. But the Shem Shmuel explains it's not really on the left side. Ner Chanukah is on the left side, meaning the opposite of the mezuzah. Ner Chanukah is on the right side, going out of the house. And the reason for that is that by nature, the purpose of the mezuzah is to protect the interior of the Jewish home from outside influences. And therefore, the mezuzah represents the shmira when you step into your house. Leave the tumah outside. The mezuzah blocks it. Inside the house there is Kedusha. Ner Chanukah is exactly the opposite idea. The purpose of Ner Chanukah is to take the Kedusha of the Jewish home, which until now has been confined to its interior walls, and to broadcast it and to allow for it to radiate outside. Ner Chanukah is Pasum Enisa, it's a spashtus of Kedusha out to the Rishus HaRabim. So for all practical purposes, Ner Chanukah is also on the right side, but unlike the mezuzah, which is on the right side coming in, Ner Chanukah's objective is the right side going out. I'm bringing the Kedusha of the inside of my house out to the street. Now we find that the punishment of Gehenna, Rahman al-Islam, is sometimes through Eish, sometimes through fire, and sometimes through cold, through sheleg, extreme cold, whatever that means. Of course, it's not in a physical sense, but in concept, the Zohar HaKadosh tells us that there are two different types of Gehenna. It's either too hot or it's too cold. Gehenna of Eish is for Zeir Sloisaseh. If a person willfully allows himself to be consumed in the Eish HaTaiva, and therefore he is over Aveiros and does not do tshuva, so Chazal say, Kol Davar Sheyavi Be'Eish Taviru Be'Eish. The Taher, the way to kasher a keli that was used over fire, is only through fire. Eish of Gehenna is not a revenge process. Eish of Gehenna is a purification process. Now the other type of Gehenna, where it's too cold, the Gehenna of Sheleg, that is a punishment for the lack of fulfilling a mitzvah with his slavos, with the bread. Now when a person violates mitzvahs loisaseh, when he engages aveiros, so what he's doing is, he is opening the door of his house and he is allowing the tumah of the street to come into his house. He is allowing for the sitra achra to come into the boundaries of holiness. By the opposite kind of an aveira, where he does not pursue the mitzvah say properly, so it's the opposite effect. By doing the mitzvah say, by going out and davening and learning and giving tzedakah, you would have taken your internal kiddusha and injected it into the street, and you have failed to do so. In regard to the Eish of Chayil, Shlomo HaMelech says, Lo yisira lebeisa mishamet. Don't worry about snow in her house. Ki chol beisa lavish shanim. The Zohar says, Al tikri shanim ela shnayim. Don't worry about snow in her house because you have pairs of mitzvahs. You have sets of mitzvahs. For example, you have the mitzvah of bris milah. You have the mitzvah of milah, and that comes along with its pair, the mitzvah of priya, revealing the milah. You have a second set. You have tzitzis, and that comes along with tefillin. Then you have another set. You have mezuzah, and it comes along with Ner Chanukah. Zok the Zohar, because you have these sets of mitzvahs, you have no need to be concerned with Gehenna. These mitzvahs are enumerated in the Zohar on this pasuk. Now, if you take a look at these sets of mitzvahs, they represent both aspects of what we discussed. Keeping the tumah out and preventing the kedusha from staying in. Milah and priya. Milah is the cutting, which represents cutting out the kachis of tumah. Priya is revealing the makam hamilah, that represents the opposite, the hispashtis of kedusha. Then the next set is tzitzis and tefillin. Tzitzis represents a protection from the world. The Gemara tells us in Masechtas Menachos about a person who sold all of his money because he was so inflamed with the Yetzer Hara to go out and hire a certain zayna, a certain prostitute. And this is a person who sold everything. He had nothing left. And this zayna sat on a huge throne, and as he was about to approach her, his sisters accidentally slapped him across the face. And so Tamang Chaptazat sitter that he just ran away. And of course, he did not get a refund. And the Zaina was so horrified that a person can have such strength after having lost everything, his house, his money, his bank accounts, his stocks. He left penniless. All he had was his sisters. That she pursued the matter, she begged his Rosh Hashiva to be with him, and eventually she was Megayah herself and married him. But Akopadim, you see over here that sisters have the koyach to be meneya a yid from a veira, to lack out the tumah, even under the most challenging of circumstances. Tefillin, on the other hand, the point of tefillin is v'ro kalami yoretz kishem Hashem nikra lecha v'yaramimaka. Tefillin is mashpia, a yira. Tefillin is our badge of honor that declares our amunah to the world. So again, the pair of tzitzis and tefillin represent the two aspects. Tzitzis, a protection from the tumah coming inside. Tefillin, the source of kiddusha, to be radiated outside. And the third set that the Zohar mentions in explaining this pasuk that protects the person from Gehenna are the two mitzvahs of mezuzah and ner Chanukah. And that, as we explained, also signifies the two concepts, the protection of going in and the protection of going out. Mezuzah is a shmira so that a davar chatzoni should not come into the house, which is the shmira on loisa says, that a person should not be affected by the taivas and temptations of the world. And ner Chanukah is the persumei nisa, it's the mitzvah hasei, it's the hispashtis of the boundaries of Kiddusha from inside out. Now on Purim, we are told clearly by the Midrashim, by the Gemara, what exactly the chet was that triggered the Purim crisis. They were Nehen and Isudas Achashverosh. By the Churban Abayis, we are told, first Beis HaMikdash Gil Yerayis, Shvichas Dama, by the Zara, second Beis HaMikdash Sinas Chinam, and so on. By Chanukah, where the truth is we have a little in the Gemara and the Midrashim about the story of Chanukah. The whole story of Chanukah is confined to virtually one paragraph, although there is much about the halachos of Chanukah. But we aren't told clearly what exactly did the Yidden do wrong during the days of the Chashmonaim that triggered this Gzeira, that brought down the Yevanim upon them to start with. The Maharal says, and the Bach also says this, that the Chet was a krius and atzlus bi'avodah, a certain coldness and laziness, a very nonchalant, laid-back attitude to the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Should I go daven now? Okay, finally I managed to drag myself over, and I did some lip service. No cheshik, no geschmack, no enthusiasm, no real love to Torah and mitzvahs. So therefore the tshuva had to be exactly the opposite. It had to be a brand new start in avodah. And that's represented by the ner of Chanukah, the flame that picks up by itself. Try hard enough and the Kadosh Baruch Hu will give you that geschmack. And that's what Chanukah is supposed to be. Chanukah is supposed to be turning a brand new page in terms of our davening, in terms of our learning and doing mitzvahs and so on. Now, if everything works as a set, does that mean that if someone doesn't have a mezuzah, there's no point in him having ner of Chanukah? Because based on what we're saying, one could make the argument that if I don't have a mezuzah to keep the tumah from outside coming into my house, what's the point of turning around and bringing the inside of my house out if it's not filtered out of tumah? Could the argument be made that if I don't have a pair of tzitzis to keep the tumah from outside coming into me, what's the point of a pair of tefillin to radiate the Kiddusha from inside me outward? The Shem Shmuel says, well, it depends. If someone willfully doesn't put on a mezuzah, if someone intentionally doesn't wear tzitzis, then en hachanami. He has also destroyed his mitzvah ner Chanukah, and he has also destroyed his mitzvah of tefillah. Because it works as a team. You have to first keep the tumah out and be makadosh the inside in order to set up a situation where you can have that Kiddusha radiate outside. But if someone doesn't have a mezuzah because circumstances are such where he can't have a mezuzah, or someone doesn't have tzitzis because he can't have tzitzis, he's an einus, he was not able to acquire tzitzis, so just the opposite. Then what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for him is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I know you tried to keep the tumah out. If you didn't have the vehicles at your disposal to be able to accomplish that, I will allow for the other mitzvah to do both. In other words, if a person doesn't have tzitzis, so the mitzvah of tefillin will work for both, to keep the tumah out and to spread the Kedusha from inside to the world. If a person doesn't have the mezuzah, then the HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, fine, ner Chanukah will do both. That is why the halacha is, in a doorway where there is no mezuzah for whatever reason, not willful neglect, but for some other reason, adrabah, you put the ner Chanukah on the right side. Because then ner Chanukah takes both. Pardon the analogy. But in order to have a successful team, you need a good defense and a good offense. Sometimes, when the defense is not in position, the offense compensates for it and plays defense as well. And again, that's the basis to say that if there is no mezuzah, ner Chanukah moves to the right side, it's going to do both. It'll keep the tumah out as well as spreading the Kedusha from inside outwards. Now there are certain mitzvahs that by nature represent both to start with. For example, Shabbos. By Shabbos we say, Zachar v'shamar b'divrei echad nemru. Zachar is Yom Shabbos l'kashrei, which is the mitzvah of Kiddush, the aspect of the Kiddush of Shabbos emanating to the world, as well as Shomer Yom HaShabbos L'Kafshay, which is the guarding of the Lamites Malachos, keeping the choil, the work of the street, away from Shabbos. Both are lechatchila encompassed in Shabbos. Shabbos represents both. Yosef HaTzadik was the B'china of Shabbos. Yosef HaTzadik represents the symbol of a Yid pushing away the Tumah. He faced the ultimate Nisayan and passed, and he paved the way for Klal Yisrael. But by the same token, Yosef HaTzadik is the ultimate mashpia for Klal Yisrael. He's mashpia parnasa for the world. Yosef HaTzadik commanded the mitzvah of milah, as we discussed earlier. And that is what the Shvatim took issue with. The Shvatim recognized Yosef as being the koyach to defer the Yetzer Hara, and the one who was going to pave the way for Klal Yisrael in this regard. But Yosef, through his dreams, also claimed Malchus. Yosef claimed that his job was not only to ward off the Tumah, but it was to be mashpia the Kedusha outward. And here's where the Shvatim said, no, now you're overstepping your bounds. That part, the Malchus part of being mashpia the Kedusha outward, belongs exclusively to Yehuda. And the Shvatim felt that this was such a crucial mistake that Yosef was being annoyed by Malchus. If the defense and the offense is not situated properly, then the whole army falls apart. But the Shvatim were wrong, because Yosef does represent a certain aspect of Malchus, and it is not a contradiction to the aspect of Malchus that Yehuda represents. When Mashiach is going to come, we will see a Mashiach ben Yosef and a Mashiach ben David. Malchus started with Shaul HaMelech, who comes from Rachel, and then David HaMelech, who comes from Leah, who comes from Yehuda. If that's what brings the Zohar, at Klal Yisrael ben Zoicha, the Malchus of Shaul and David would have worked in harmony. Because Yosef represents both the period of Shoftim, who are supposed to ward off the Tumah, and the B'china of Malchus, which is Mashpia Kedusha. Therefore, unlike anyone else, Yosef had to deal directly with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Asking the Saramashkim to help him was considered a chesaron, being that indeed he was wearing these two hats. And that's why he had to spend another 2 years in prison. One for a lack of living up to his position of the ultimate shofet, warding off the Tumah, and the other for the lack of living up to his position of Malchus, which is Mashpia the Kiddush. Zechatani Deskartani, for those 2 words that he said to the Saramashkim, he spent another 2 years in prison to be Mesak in this. And the emes is, the Maharal tells us and the Bach tells us that the chait that brought on the Gzeir of the Yevonim was a laxity, a lack of cheshik and enthusiasm for Torah and mitzvahs. They were doing the mitzvahs too nonchalantly. The Chasrinoim brought back the flame to the will of Klal Yisrael when it came to the fulfillment of mitzvahs through their Mesiras Nefesh. And that is represented by the Ner of Hanukkah. We made mistakes, the Tumah got in, but we are ready to fight back. We are ready to be Mashpia the Kedusha outwards regardless. And that is why indeed Hanukkah is a time that we have to recommit ourselves to our cheshik for Torah mitzvahs, because this represents the ultimate Ner Hanukkah, which is Mashpia the Kedusha from inside Klal Yisrael out to the world. A certain very chashuv Yid, a leader of the Kehillah, passed away, and there was a dispute amongst the sons who should take over. One of the sons came to the Satmar Rabbi Chaim Levrach and said, I had a dream. My father came to me in a dream and said I should be the one to take over. And the Satmar Rebbe asked him, how come he didn't come to your brothers and say, you should be the one to take over? In other words, inasmuch as your dreams are concerned, what you're imagining, what you're fantasizing about, that's what you see at night. In terms of reality, it's going to be the more worthy brother that's going to take over, and you, for all practical purposes, will be left with your pleasant dreams. Now, the Gemara in the Sechtes Brachos makes it very clear. Ein marin lo la'adam ela hirhurei diyayna. What a person sees at night is what he thought about during the day. Daniel said so beferish to Nebuchadnezzar. He said, Rayayncha al mishkavcha saliku. Your rayaynas, your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, your aspirations that develop and that you indulge in during the day, that's what you see at night. The Mr. Mashal says that there are 3 different kinds of dreams. There are the dreams that a person sort of reviews the day's events, or the thoughts of a person, the subconscious that plays itself out in a form of reality in his imagination when he sleeps. the perfectly natural dreams. Those are most of the dreams, says the Mashal. There is, however, a higher degree of a dream, where there are certain ha'arai, certain emanations that come down from Shemayim, and they manifest themselves in different ways, depending on the madrega of the person, and he has some type of an insight of something that is coming. And then there is another type of dream, which is even more rare, and that is a neshama that actually reveals itself to the person from the Olam Elyon to convey a certain message, feeling, bracha, whatever the case may be. The Mashal says dreams that are closer to the Eloi schacter may have more of a tinge of reality to it. He explains certain Gemaras and Masechtas Brachos that way, but those are the three categories of dreams. So it would appear on the surface that the dream that comes because a person thought about a certain thing during the day has absolutely nothing to do with the other kind of dream, which is some type of a message from Shemayim. However, the Chassam Sofer says it's not necessarily so. The neshama of a person, says the Chassam Sofer, can look up to see what's doing in Shemayim, depending on the koyach hanefesh of that individual. The neshama stores up in sleep and receives messages and understands certain things that are happening as it relates to the neshama, as it relates to people around the neshama in Shemayim. And it's very clear. It's as clear and concise as can possibly be. The problem is when the person wakes up. Once he wakes up and the normal senses and constraints of the body take over, so the messages that he received from Shemayim in a very clear fashion during his sleep have to assume some type of a physical form, or else his mind in its conscious state has no ability to retain the message that it received when it didn't have the constraints of guf during his sleep. In other words, suddenly our neshama is wrapped up in guf, which to a great extent is hester, the neshama is hidden, and it can't hold on to the message anymore. In order for the message somehow to stay with the person, it has to quickly assume some type of a physical form or picture or story. And as a result, the human brain has an ability to retain it. And basically, this is Pshat, says the Chassam Sofer, what the Gemara tells us in the Masechtas Nida, that Kol Zman the neshama is b'mei iman, when the baby is in the mother, there's a ner dolik al roishai. The neshama is not yet in guf, the way the neshama relates to guf in physical life. And the neshama has access to kol kula as taught to him by the mouth. Once, however, the baby comes to life in the senses of life as we perceive it, of life as we can communicate from it and to it, so that Torah, that the Malach taught it, gets hidden to the subconscious world of the child. Now, not chas v'shalom that we're looking for any type of a raya or what the Chassam Sofer says needs any substantiation. But it is a well-known thing that dream experts write, every person dreams whenever he sleeps. There are statistics about this. When a person sleeps for a certain amount of minutes, he always has a dream, except that most dreams are forgotten. Scientists know this by connecting certain types of monitoring equipment to the brain. The brain waves are different during normal sleep and sleep during a dream. There are rapid eye movements during a dream. So they can tell when a person is dreaming. And it's a scientific fact that every person dreams after he sleeps for a certain amount of moments. But when he wakes up, he forgets the dream. Even more so, scientists say that we never remember dreams once we wake up and start moving around. As a matter of fact, if a person does remember a dream that he had last night, it's only because when he opened his eyes, before he even moved and started thinking about anything else, the dream was still on the film, so to speak. And what he remembers afterwards is he remembers remembering the dream. The dugma l'mashal, sometimes you remember certain childhood things because you saw pictures of it. In reality, you don't even remember it. You remember the picture, but some of the pictures ties you into some type of subconscious state in your mind that you remember vaguely. You went to Eretz Yisrael when you were 3 years old, and you see the picture. So somehow, all you remember is the picture. But the picture connects you to some type of subconscious feeling that maybe you remember something. And it's hard to differentiate sometimes. If you remember the picture, or the slides, or you remember actually being there. Well, no one ever remembers dreams per se, but sometimes the image is sort of still on the brain when we wake up, and as a result we remember remembering it. It's sort of a step removed from actually remembering the dream. And it's interesting to note that psychologists who follow a person's dreams, study them, ask that a person should keep a pad and paper right next to his bed. This way, as soon as he opens his eyes, he can write down the dream. Of course, we would say Maidani and wash Nagelwasser first. But again, another scientific reality. Once he gets up and starts moving around, he totally forgets the dream. And if we think about it, this is really what the Heilige Sefer Lahavdol is telling us. We don't really remember the messages that we get at night. Sometimes, however, it does assume a certain physical form in order we should be able to retain it, or retain some type of vague outlook on the message that would have to be studied afterwards. Now the Sefer says dreams go after what you think during the day, but sometimes what you think during the day or certain feelings that you have are based on certain messages that you got at night that you don't even remember. And therefore you have a certain attitude, or a certain concern, a certain anxiousness about something. And the middle of the cycle continues, you dream about it the next night. But it didn't necessarily start in your imagination. For example, says the Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos, someone dreams that he entered a forest, Nasa Rosh L'bnei Kal. That means you can look forward to becoming a Rosh Yeshiva. Obviously the trees are the Talmidim. So it could very well mean that in his real dream what he saw was a shir sitting amongst the Talmidim and actually teaching them Torah. When the neshama enters his guf right before he wakes up, it takes on some type of a physical image. It takes on some type of a gashmiistic scene, and he sees a forest. But in order for him to see a forest, he has to think about a forest. And it could very well be, says the Sefer, that the day before, the Nesavi Hasilas, the Rebbeinu Shalom, caused him to think about a forest, or to see a forest, so that in turn, that night, he was able to perceive his Rosh Yeshiva messages, that as he wakes up, manifests itself in seeing a forest. The cycle goes all the way around. So although Chazal say, Ein marin lo ela meherura diyayma, that a person only sees what he thinks about during the day, that is not to dismiss it. That is just teaching you how the cycle works. If someone is an honest, straightforward person, an ehrlicher person, so his chalonis have real meaning to it. Because even though a person is a Baal Bechira, says the Sefer, and he can think during the day whatever he wants to think about, whether in a positive sense or in a negative sense, but the bottom line is, a person's machshavos, his fears, his concerns, his hopes, different things that play out in our minds aren't always because we want to think about it. It's because events happen, because our attitude towards certain things develop them. In terms of a regular person who is a Baal Bechira, indeed, the more he refines his midas, the more he works on his aspirations, so his machshavos take on a different kind of meaning. His imagination creates a whole different scene, and in turn, in Hashemayim, he's started given certain real hashpais of Kiddusha based on his thoughts during the day. When it comes to a king, we say, Leiv Malachim V'sarim B'yad Hashem. The heart of kings and princes are in the hands of Hashem. When it comes to a person who controls the destiny of others, so in a sense, his thoughts and actions are much more tied to what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants him to think, whether that's either a schar or oynish for the people that he controls, than the regular person. When it comes to a king, often HaKadosh Baruch Hu will put him in a situation where he thinks about certain things during the day. That becomes a stepping stone to be able to reveal to him certain inyanim at night. And that's what Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar. That it's all tied together. Are your dreams simply something that you thought about during the day? Are your fears simply playing themselves out? Yes and no. Yes. So therefore I shouldn't have to worry about my dream. But no, in terms of your fears during the day were sent to you by Kadosh Baruch Hu. So in turn it does come to a certain clarity at night, whether or not you have an ability to grasp what that clarity was. And that's why, says the Chassam Sofer, the lashon of the pasuk is Pari Choylin, as opposed to Vayach when Pari and Pari had a dream. To say and Pari had a dream, that's mashma and a dream. During the day he was thinking about stuffed cabbage and some type of a Danish. So at night he dreamt about cows and food growing from the ground. That's what Vayach when Pari would mean. However, Upari Choylin suggests not that Pari on his own initiative went and dreamt, but Pari was led into these dreams. Pari may have thought about cows or food during the day, only so that the dream should play itself out at night as an official message. And while we're on the topic, Chazal stressed very much in this week's Sedra that Chaloim go achar hapeh. The way the person interprets the dream, that has a lot to do with indeed what is going to happen as a result of the dream, or what the dream is predicting that is going to happen. Chazal tell us the woman once came to Rabbi Eliezer asking him to interpret her dream. She related to him, in my dream I saw the ceiling of my house cave in. And Rabbi Eliezer said that means you're going to give birth to a male child. In other words, the cracking of the ceiling was a symbol of the pangs of birth. His words were fulfilled, and she made a shalom zacher and a birth that year. Another time the women came to find out the meaning of a dream. So when she looked for Rabbi Eliezer in the Beis HaMedrash, she could not find him. Where is your Rebbe? She asked his students. He's not. So the answer is not here now, but you tell us your dream and we will interpret it. So she said, I dreamt this, I saw my ceiling cave in. A dream like that? A ceiling caving in? So the student said that very difficult times were coming. When Rabbi Eliezer returned, he heard the woman wailing and crying, and he asked what happened over here. And when he heard that his students interpreted the dream, he began to yell. If she does experience difficult times, it's because of you, he said. What right did you have to answer her that way? The pasuk says the respective dreams of the Sahamashkim and the Sarah Oifen were fulfilled as Yosef interpreted them. In other words, Yosef's interpretation had a direct bearing on how they would indeed be fulfilled. Now the Pharisee explains that the first time the lady had the dream, she was terribly frightened. A ceiling was caving in. She came running to Rabbi Eliezer crying. This was a woman who wanted to do tshuva. This was a woman who was machniah herself, who was willing to change her ways. So it was Basher and Hashemayim she should meet Rabbi Eliezer, and indeed, Rabbi Eliezer gave her a good interpretation to the dream. But apparently her commitments to change her ways didn't last very long. And once she fell apart again in terms of her ruchnius, she was shown a frightening dream. Had she been frightened the second time, it also would have ran, please help, I want to do tshuva. She may have turned the gzeira around again as well. But the second time, she wasn't the least bit concerned. What are they trying to frighten me with, min hashemayim? Nothing's going to happen to me. As a result, it was taka v'shet min hashemayim. Instead of meeting Rabbi Eliezer, she met Talmidim who deciphered the dream differently. So the Tzartzin explains, Enochanami choloim esko acher hapeh, but which peh one encounters in an effort to interpret a dream is part of the hashgacha. And we've mentioned this many times from the Tzaddik HaKayin, that a fearful dream is a good dream, because if you're scared and concerned about it, that means you're still at the stage where you can do tshuva and flip it around. The time to really worry is when you're not worried. And of course, if you are worried about that, why you're not worried, so again, you have the same positive results. The Arvi Nachal, this week's Sedra, explains that the dream is a perception of an emanation coming from Shemayim heading down here. The gzeira of Hashem when it's in Shemayim is always good. When it enters this world, based on a person's chatoyim and aveiros, it could manifest itself in something difficult to endure. With tshuva, we can change gzeiros from a possible bad gzeira to exactly the opposite, to a source of the greatest blessing. In the olden times, Nevi'im were able to do this. They were able to see what was coming and explain to the people how to react. A cholim is 1/60th of a nevuah. Zakti Avinacha. If chas v'shol, a gzeira is headed to a person, and the way things look now, based on his actions, when this gzeira becomes a reality, there are going to be difficult times. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu may give him one last chance, through a dream, albeit a frightening dream. He goes to a person, and the person interprets the dream l'tayv. That doesn't change the gzeira. That's not in lieu of the person doing tshuva, but it gives him more time. Every hashpah that comes down from Shemayim could be tight. When it enters this world based on the person's chatoyim, it turns into a difficult gzeira. The dream means it really tactically entered this world already. The bad thing should have happened, but we're giving you one more chance. When the person interprets it l'tayv, that means, L'bayna Shalom, I still have a chance to make it good. I still have a chance to do tshuva. It's more of a deferral, says the Avinachal, than it is an exemption. By interpreting the dream l'tayv, you're sort of keeping the gzeira just above this world a wee bit longer to give him an opportunity to do tshuva, whereas a result, indeed, when the gzeira finally lands on this world, it was switched in the last moment from the worst nightmare to the most pleasant of dreams. Each year, Parshas Mikeitz, we seem to be revisiting the same question: why Yosef Atzadik had to spend another 2 years in prison just because he asked the Sar HaMashkim to help him. Aren't we supposed to do things to help ourselves? Does the Kadosh Baruch Hu want us to fold our hands and just to sit back and say, well, we have betachin, and not to do a single thing to try to make our lives better and not to enlist anyone's help or make any request of someone? Does that mean that we lack betachin? Yet Yosef Atzadik had to sit another 2 years in prison because he asked the Sahamashkim, remember and mention me in front of power. The truth is, let's take a closer look at how the Medrash explains this. It doesn't get any easier to understand. The Medrash darshans the pasuk in Tehillim, Ashrei HaGever Asher Sam Hashem Miftachai. Fortunate is the man who puts his whole trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Medrash very clearly spells out, Zeh Yosef. That is Yosef Atzadik. Yosef Atzadik symbolizes the Midas HaBetachin. He put his whole trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu throughout his life. But like Panel Rahavim, fortunate is the man, continues the pasuk, who puts his trust in Hashem and doesn't turn to the arrogant and those who are full of deceit to help him. And the Medrash goes on to explain, you see what happened to Yosef? Because he said to the Saramashkim, remember me. He got another 2 years to his sentence. The Medrash seems to be contradicting itself. First you're telling me Yosef Atzadik symbolizes he is the fortunate one. He is the Gever Shesam Hashem Miftachai. If you want to know what Betachan is about, study the life of Yosef Atzadik. And then you tell me, but don't do what Yosef did. He asked the Saramashkim to help him. And what he got for that was another 2 years in jail. So the Chayr is the Siva. The Sefer Nesivas Shalom, quoting Rav Mendel of Vitebsk, explains this Medrash really in a most beautiful fashion. And that's the reason that we have to revisit it every year, because the kind of Dvar Torah we're going to hear now is something that with each year of maturity and with each year of another experience in life, of learning from our mistakes or other mistakes, we can understand this on a deeper level. You can never fully understand it, but we can understand it more and more as the years go on. B'Yezras Hashem Yisbarach. So he tells a story about the Baal Shem Tov, when he was still unknown, that once he had absolutely nothing with Tzarchei Shabbos. Nothing in his house. So he went to the house of a certain rich person, and he knocked on his door. He knocked on the door, turned around and left. The Yid comes to the door, there's no one there. He sees the Baal Shem Tov walking away, so he runs after him. And he says to him, if you knocked on my door, you probably needed something, so why didn't you wait for me to come to the door? The Baal Shem Tov answered him that HaKadosh Baruch Hu determines for every individual how much he has and what he has to do in order to get it. And the emes is, if we were perfectly pure and there wouldn't be a mashdu of chait in us, we wouldn't have to do anything. Whatever is supposed to come to us would come to us automatically, like the man. It would just rain down from Shemayim. But depending on who the person is, a certain amount of ishtadlus, a certain amount of effort is necessary. The further away we are from complete bitachon, then the more hishtadlus, then the more physical effort, the more planning, the more actual attempt to attain for ourselves is necessary. Now, I know that I have to do tshuva on something, and therefore the parnasa was not going to rain into my house today. But I also know exactly the amount of hishtadlus that is required of me. It was necessary for me, for the tzarech of my parnasa, to go and to knock on your door. I also knew that if my midas habitachon had a bigger pagam, it would have been necessary for me to remain there and wait for you to come out and ask you. However, I know exactly what I have to be misaken. I know exactly my midas habitachon lacks just this drop that I have to knock on your door. More than that was not necessary. It was not b'shet for me to have to stand there and actually ask you. In other words, for the vast majority, more than the vast majority, for basically almost all of us, we cannot fold our hands and hide behind a cloak of bitachon. The truth is, if we did have 1,000% pure bitachon and a chanami, we can fold our hands and it would come to us. But for the average person on the street to assume, for you and I, well at least I, to assume that we have that madrega bitachon, we're fooling ourselves. And therefore we are obligated to engage in whatever hishtadlus is necessary. However, the limit of that hishtadlus depends on our level of bitachon. Yosef HaTzadik reached the shleimus of the midas habitachon. And Yosef HaTzadik knew that. The tzaddik knows his madregas. Yosef HaTzadik knew that when he sits down and says, I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that everything is going to work out, he means that with all of his heart. There is not a mashu of doubt. And that is why he seemingly contradicted his very essence by then turning to the Tzar Mashkim and asking him to help. And this is Shana the Medrash. The Medrash begins by B'davka explaining to us, don't be misled by this. We have to ask people to help us. What happened to Yosef HaTzadik? Here's the aside. The more bitachon you have, the less you have to come on to people. And that is in ascending order, depending on how much bitachon you have. If you are someone like Yosef HaTzadik, who had the shleimus of midas habitachon, there Yosef, it was not necessary at all for him to enlist anyone's help. And therefore, for Yosef, it was considered somewhat of a chait, relatively speaking, relative to the madrega of Yosef HaTzadik, that he turned to the Tzar Mashkim, and that cost him another 2 years, which he accepted. But for the rest of us, we have to measure our hishtadlus based on the level of our bitachon, or continuously work on our bitachon so that less hishtadlus should be necessary, or that the little hishtadlus that we do should be successful. I have shared with you many times the story I heard from my father, Zechayim Levracha, that the Alshach HaKadosh once darshan this very same drasha, that there is a level of bitachon without hishtadlus. And there was a water carrier in his town who came home and said, I have to be out of my mind. If bitachon works, why do I have to schlep the heavy water every day? And his wife thought he had gone mad. He just took a tillum and sat down, and day in, day out, he refused to go out to work. There was nothing in the house. The cupboard was empty. The children were screaming they're hungry. He said, I'm no fool. I'm not going to work if you can get whatever you need with bitachon. In desperation, she went out to a local Arab merchant and began to beg for food. Taking advantage of the situation, he said to her, if you give me your husband's horse and wagon, I'll give you some bread for supper. And she was so desperate that she gave away the horse and wagon, and she said to him, now look what you did. Now we don't even have a horse and wagon. But he was unfazed. He just said, well, we have bread. You see, bitachon works. Well, the next night there was no bread, there was no horse, there was no wagon. And she said to him, now you can't even go to work if you want to. You have nothing to drag the water with. And he said, I don't need anything to drag the water with. I have bitachon. Well, the next day, the one who manipulated the wagon out of the wife also went for a ride, and he noticed a treasure near a tree, under the roots of a tree. He loaded it up onto the wagon. And when he needed one more diamond, so he decided to take a saw and cut into one root, not realizing that the tree would come crashing down on him. The horse that now became an ownerless horse didn't know where to go, but it went home to where it was always used to going home, and that is to the water carrier. And just as she was about to say, this is absurd, I can't take it anymore, look, what do you think, a treasure is going to come walking in through the door because you're saying Tehillim? Just as she said those words, the door opened up, and in came in the horse with the treasure. And he was unfazed. He just continued saying Tehillim as if to say, well, of course that was going to happen. I had bitachon. So the entire town was up with this story, including the Talmidim of the Yalshach HaKadosh, and they came back to the Yalshach HaKadosh. And the Talmidim told him what happened, very nice, and the Yalshach said, I see something is bothering you. And the Talmidim said, yes. They said to their Rebbe, we're working on the Midas HaBetachon for years, we're working on Betachon, and how come these things don't happen to us? How come no treasure ever walked in through our doors? So the Yalshach HaKadosh said, I'll explain it to you. You're too smart. This water carrier is a simple-minded person, and that was his advantage. He's so simple-minded, he has no doubts. When he heard that if you have bitachon, you'll get what you want, there was not a mashal of suffix in his mind. There was absolutely no question. He wasn't 99% sure, 99.9% sure. He was 100% sure. And therefore, that pure level of bitachon brought him the treasure. Unfortunately, because your IQ is higher, therefore your skepticism is higher, and that blocks perfect bitachon. You have to measure your hishtadlus relative to the bitachon that you have. That does not suggest that bitachon is only for the feeble-minded, but it's only for people on either side of the spectrum. Either the person is such a great tzaddik that despite his intelligence, despite his understanding how the world usually works, he knows that he can reach a level of bitachon where no questions are asked, and then he attains what he needs, or he is such a simple person. But for everyone else in the middle, the maybe not is what you have to be realistic about. That means you don't have the full shleimus habitachon, and therefore for you, hishtadlus is necessary. Again, the story was mentioned many times, and I heard from my father, and it's brought down in many different places. Reb Chaim Volozhiner was dashed about bitachon in Volozhin 3 o'clock in the morning. They used to have shiurim 24 hours, 12-hour shifts. Sometimes the vad was in the middle of the morning. Now, actually, they didn't know that it was 3 o'clock because Reb Chaim Volozhiner asked if anyone knew what time it was. The wall clock was broken. And one of the Talmidim sort of smirked and said to a friend, well, I guess if we really had bitachon, there would be a clock here somehow in the middle of the night. It would just pop up out of nowhere. And Reb Chaim Volozhiner overheard it and he resented it. He said, you think I don't believe what I say? I have bitachon not only that there should be a watch in this room, there should be a gold watch in this room with a golden chain. Everyone was sort of taken aback. A couple of minutes later, there's a commotion outside, and a Jewish soldier comes running in. Rebbe, he says, they've taken everything away from me. They stole everything I had. All I have left is a gold watch I got from my mother. We're being sent into battle now. Please, watch this for me. But Reb Chaim Volozhiner said, no. I said, I don't know when you're going to come back. I can't take responsibility on it. So he said, Rebbe, if I don't come back for it, it's yours as a gift. Please. My battalion was moving through here during the night, and I know they're going to steal it from me. Please take it. If it's in your hands, it's just as good as I have it. Use it for your study sessions. That should be a schooler for me to survive the war. Indeed, Reb Chaim Volozhiner gave him a bracha. And he held up the gold watch for his Talmidim to see. So again, you either have to be Reb Chaim Volozhiner, or you have to be someone who is so simple. But if there's any drop of skepticism, it doesn't work. Like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, if you bought a lottery ticket for $1, let's say, and you claim you have the bitachon you're going to win the $1 million, if someone came over to you and he was willing to buy this $1 lottery ticket from you for $999,000, would you give it to him? If you would, then you don't really have bitachon. Bitachon means without any shadow of a doubt. Now, there are levels of bitachon on the way up. It's not either no bitachon or yes bitachon, but complete bitachon that doesn't require any hishtadlus means, why should I sell it for $999,000 when I can get $1 million for it? Why should I throw away $1? The emes is the union of bitachon is an eitzah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave every year. It's a kind of ammunition that stands beside him regardless of what type of situation life brings. And the more the level of bitachon, the more gateways are opened up for the person. That's what Yaakov Avinu told him when they went down to Mitzrayim the second time. He said, bring him a gift. What would the gift be? Ma'at tzariya ma'at vash. A little bit of sap, a little bit of honey. Why a little bit? Why not a lot? If you bring a present to a king, you want it to have a respectable quantity. The Tarek says, explains in the Siva Shalom, Yaakov Avinu measured, relative to the situation that the Shvatim were in, what level of Ishtadlus would be necessary. Clearly there was a Gzerim in the Shemayim that Ishtadlus was necessary. But don't overdo it. If you overdo the Ishtadlus, it's going to be counterproductive. Then you're saying that it's not a Kadosh Baruch Hu that's going to send you the Atzlacha, but it's your own Ishtadlus. And you're doomed for failure. Feel that you have to do, because they don't have the level of B'tachin, do what is necessary, but not more than what is necessary. Ma'at sorry, ma'at vash. A little bit of sap and a little bit of honey. The Noam Elimelech says, Hineni mantir lachem lechem min hashemayim. This is his lashon. Ki imo yebetech b'leiv neman. If a person had betachin with the whole heart, ha'yse parnasasei mizumenes lo shaloi b'tzar, v'yavodas klal. He wouldn't have to work at all. It would just rain. But the pasuk says afterwards, the yatsa ha'am, everyone went out and they gathered. However, if a person doesn't have the complete level of betachin, so the pasuk goes on to say that each day they went out and they gathered. Every day you have to gather, you have to go out and provide the effort based on your level of betachin relative to that day. The Nesiva Shalom goes on to explain there's an important chidush in the union of betachin that the Rambam stresses in his Sefer Emunah Betachin. The pasuk says, "Betach b'Hashem v'yasei." First, betach b'Hashem, first have faith in Hashem, and afterwards the say do good. In other words, what's David HaMelech teaching us? That even if you don't have the maisim, even if you don't have the good deeds to back you up, and you know that you've done things that may even qualify you for the status of Rasha, betachin still works. It's betach b'Hashem even if he didn't yet do any time. We have tzaddik says, a goddess who's climbing into a window, and he's frightened. He says, Hashem, please don't let them catch me. It's a maisachet, it's an avei who's going to have to pay for the avei, but that tefillah also has some type of mokim and shemayim. B'tachin doesn't discriminate. The only thing is usually the level of b'tachin depends on a person's good deeds. If a person has a certain amount of avei, he's not going to have b'tachin. So it's like a short tablecloth. But in essence, by definition, betachin works for anyone who masters the complete midah of betachin. And it is not contingent on the person's actions. The pasuk says, Vayira Yaakov, that he was so frightened. So the Gemara says, he was frightened. Perhaps sin would cause that the promises offered to him didn't have to be fulfilled. Wait a second. Didn't the Rambam just say that chait and betachin are not related? Dr. Nesiva Shalom shot in the Gemara is Yaakov was scared Shema Yigram HaChait that perhaps as a result of his fate he would lose his midas habetachin or the full midas habetachin that he had. The normal evolution of chait is the more a person is chait, the more he thinks that he's the one that controls his destiny. That was Yaakov's concern. But in essence, betachin is not affected by chait, and it is the koyach of betachin that stood up for the Chashmonaim in their war against Yavam. That is the stress of Gebarim Yad Chaloshim, the strong in the hands of the weak, Rabim B'Yad Miyatim, Tneim B'Yad Tahoyrim. They knew, logistically speaking, they were outnumbered, outarmed. But their assessment was that if they can lift their midas habetachin, there would be only a certain amount of hishtadlus necessary on their part, and if they reached the hishtadlus that was necessary on their part relative to their midas habetachin, all these other factors, like counting how many elephants the enemy had, would become a totally meaningless part of the data here. They worked on their betachin until it reached its maximum level that was shayach for that time period. Relative to that, they would apply their greatest hishtadlus, and that's how they were able to overcome the gebarim b'yad chaloshim, the rabim b'yad miyatim, the tmeim b'yad tahor. The facts on the ground would become completely irrelevant if they understood how much betachin was in their heart and how much they had to do in order to attain a higher level of betachin. Of course, as we all know, the pasuk makes it very clear that before Yosef was summoned to interpret the dreams, Pari tried with his standard dream interpreter. Vayishlach vayikras kol chatumei Mitzrayim v'kol chachoneha vayisaper Pari lahem es chaloimai v'ein poiser oisam leparoi. Oh, they tried. They had all sorts of interesting ideas and evaluations, but Pari didn't buy it. What were their suggestions? The Midrashim tell us, they said, Your Majesty, this is a very easy dream to interpret. It's obvious. One magician said that the 7 big cows represented 7 daughters that Pari was going to have, and he went on to predict what was going to happen to those daughters. Pari was not satisfied. Another interpreter ventured, well, the 7 good ears of corn stand for 7 kingdoms that you will conquer. Their fate at the hands of the 7 thin ears indicated they will rebel against you. The king wasn't happy. It just didn't seem to him that this was the real meaning of the dream. Hundreds of Egyptian astrologers and magicians streamed to the palace and stood on line, offering their wisdom to the king. They presented a host of different interpretations. None of their explanations met with Pari's approval. Of course, there was the hashgacha, that no one should think of the true Pisrein HaCholim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu thwarted the wisdom of all magicians and astrologers in the kingdom in order that Yosef should be the one to offer the correct explanation and become the Mishnah L'Melech. As a matter of fact, the Midrashim point out another Nekuda in the hashgacha, that the Rebbeinu Shalom caused Yosef to be called last after everyone else had offered his interpretation. Think about this for a moment. Had Yosef interpreted Pari's dream at the beginning, then the magicians would have claimed, well, had Pari only given us a chance, we would have said the exact same thing. But it was only after it was made clear that all of the chachma of the great Egyptian magicians, dream interpreters, after everything was exhausted and the riddle was clearly unsolved, only then did the Sahamashkim remember Yosef. So understanding indeed that it was hashgacha, that the Chatumei Mitzrayim should not be able to interpret the dream, let's take a closer look at that hashgacha and let's ask the question, what was their mistake? And why wasn't Pari happy with the interpretation of the dream? The Netziv points out that the mistake of the Chatumei Mitzrayim is a fundamental mistake by people who are over-anxious to read between the lines and as a result miss the lines themselves. There are people who are so convinced that there is something behind the scenes that they can reveal, they become totally oblivious to what's doing in front of the curtain. There is a legend that someone once came to the Rav Shesadav and he asked, Rebbe, tell me, why is it that you cut your fingernails Erev Shabbos only after you go to the mikveh and not beforehand? And the Rebbe told him that if you fast for 3 days, I will tell you the answer. And so after 3 days of fasting and praying, he came back to the Rav Shesadav and he said, now Rebbe, I am at the Madrega, I have purified my soul, I am ready to hear these great secrets of Kabbalah. Tell me the reason that reflects what goes on in the innermost chambers of the heavenly spheres. Tell me the reason, Rebbe, why you cut your nails after the mikveh as opposed to beforehand. And the Rav Shesadav said, because they are softer then and easier to cut. Although I have heard from the Skolani Rebbe Chaim Levracha that he does not believe the story is true, he said that it is impossible that Rav Shesadav would make someone fast for 3 days just to prove a point or for some type of a prank. Still, the idea behind the legend represents an important lesson. Before you begin to look for the secrets, understand the obvious. The Netziv quotes the pasuk that the Medrash brings about the Chatumei Mitzrayim is a mistake, about all of these hundreds of interpretations that all proved to naught, that meant nothing to Pari. Bikesh leitz chachma. The leitz, he looks for wisdom, the ayin, but it's not there for him. It evades him. The daf, but understanding, l'novin, for the person who really thinks, nakel is easy. It's there, it's accessible to him. Bikesh leitz chachma. The light looks for wisdom, the ayin, and it's not there. Elu chachmei Pari v'chatumei Mitzrayim. The daf l'novin nakel, an understanding for the person who really thinks into things is easy. Zeh Yosef, that refers to Yosef. What is a leitz? Asks the Netziv. What is Litzanis? Litzanis is a person who, under normal circumstances, doesn't really think into things. He looks for a good joke, he looks for a good line, usually at someone else's expense. And he likes to sit through the day. This is his pleasure in life, to sit down during the lunch hour, to sit down in the morning before work starts, and who can he poke fun at, who can he make fun of, what machloikis can he get involved in, where is there some controversy or politics that he can draw some attention to himself through. That's the light. When he gets a good laugh, now people know that he exists. His whole Surah Fachai represents the opposite of really thinking into what any issue really is. The light thinks that he is smarter than everyone else. After all, he's the one that's laughing at everyone. But the light is sometimes too smart for himself. Because in his own shitchiistic way, he has already touched up the entire world. And he has a line and a jab, and he can make fun of everyone. When a situation comes his way, where it calls for some type of analysis on his part, and he has to really think through what is happening now to me, he doesn't know how to do it. He's not used to doing it. He's not used to looking for the MS. He's not used to taking something at face value, understanding what sense of direction it represents. He's used to making a good laugh out of everything. So when he's faced with a situation that he does have to understand something, the wheels in his brain that try to think things through or are supposed to help interpret a situation and therefore tell us what to do, they're rusty. It doesn't work right. And sometimes he may be overzealous in his desperation to suddenly try to find the emes when he realizes that now the laugh is on himself, and as a result he does not come out with a clear understanding. The Chetumei Mitzrayim and the Chachmei Mitzrayim were Leitzim and Reikim. Their whole mahalach of their machshav explains in the Tziv was Shitchi L'Chatzayni. The entire world was one big joke. They had their ideas in politics, they had their ideas how to assess others, and now Pari summoned them in an emergency situation. He was determined to interpret his dream. And he placed everything down in front of them. A simple story. 7 big cows that were swallowed by 7 skinny cows. 7 plump ears of grain that were swallowed by 7 thin and wind-beaten ears of grain. It doesn't really take all that chachma to interpret this at face value. That there's going to be good years and then there's going to be difficult years that are going to be so troubling that it's going to swallow up all the memories of the good years. Is there really such tremendous wisdom over here? It seems to be the simple uptights of the situation. But the Chetumei Mitzrayim, who their very mahus was not to interpret things at face value, but to make a joke out of everything on someone else's cheshbon, when they were suddenly faced with this dream, they jumped to overanalyze it, to read between the lines, to find some mystical message over here about 7 daughters that Pari was going to have, about 7 countries that he was going to conquer. And Pari knew something was missing. What was missing? What were they scratching their heads on? What couldn't all of the king's men come up with? It didn't occur to anyone to simply touch the words, to look at the simple pshat. There are going to be good years and then difficult years. No one thought of that. The old story of the person that came to the Rav and said, Rabbi, what do I write on my income tax return? If I write too much, then I'm going to run into all sorts of problems. If I write too little, I'll never be able to apply for a loan. I'm ripping the hair out of my head. I've gone from accountant to accountant, from lawyer to lawyer. I don't know what to do. And the Rav told him, why don't you just write the truth? And he said, Rabbi, thank you. I never thought of that. Dr. Netziv, that's what happened to the Chetumei Mitzrayim. The more Pari was dissatisfied with their answers, so the more they tried to come up with all sorts of cryptic messages and secrets over here, and they were going in exactly the opposite direction. All they had to do was to touch a simple pshat. Difficult times are going to swallow up the good times. Bikish leit chachma, suddenly the leit seeks chachma, the ayin. He can't find it. V'das l'noven. Das means a deep understanding, l'noven, for the person who really looks for the emes and really tries to understand things for what they are, not necessarily so that it works out for him. That refers to Yosef. The great chachma of Yosef over here, the great kedusha of Yosef over here, wasn't that he came up with a moyerdika chap. He was able to think of something that no one else was able to think of. Yosef was the one who said, wait, let's just read the Pashat Pshat. The big cows and the plump ears of corn are the good years. The thin cows, the wind-beaten ears of corn are bad years. prepare the food. That's what the pasuk means. V'das, true deep understanding, l'novin, for one who really exercises bina and attempts to evaluate things properly throughout the course of his life, comes so easy. It comes so easy because before you see anything else, you understand the Pashat Pshat. There is a vel for it, that there was a man who was in a boat that was sinking, and he said, Rabbeinu Shalom, save me. And along came a boat, and people on the other boat said, no, quickly, come to our boat. And he said, no, I wanted Rabbeinu Shalom to save me. And along came a helicopter and said, here, quickly, grab this string. He said, no, I wanted Rabbeinu Shalom to save me. Along came someone in a raft. And he said, here, quickly, grab this life preserver. And the man said, no, I wanted Rabbeinu Shalom to save me. And at the end, he drowned. So he stood before the Pamoni Shamayla, and he had kindness. He said, I wanted the Rabbeinu Shalom to save me. How come it didn't happen? So the Pamoni Shamayla said, what's the matter with you? The Rabbeinu Shalom sent you a boat, a raft, and a helicopter. The greatest bracha in life is an ability not to be able to see through the secrets of the universe, but to understand the Pashat Pshat of what is happening right in front of you. That's the mistake of the Chetumei Mitzrayim, and that was the great Chachma of Yosef. The Rebbeinu Shem is forever sending us rafts and helicopters and boats. Every difficulty has a solution. Every refuah is created before the Makkah. But we need the Siyata Deshmaya to be able to read the simple directions instead of looking for things that are beyond us and are totally irrelevant to the situation. But there's another Nakud over here on the other side of the coin. The greatness of Yosef Atzadik was an ability to say, just write the emes, just take hold of the life preserver, cut your nails after the mikvah because they're softer then, but bear in mind, even if you're going to follow these simple directions, you still need the Siyata Deshmaya. And without the Rabbeinu Shalom, it's not going to work. When the hunger suddenly struck, the Midrashim tell us that the Mitzrayim were still sitting and enjoying their meals, and suddenly the bread on their table suddenly became moldy, and there was no more edible food. Things happened just as Yosef predicted. So they turned to Yosef to obtain grain. They came to Yosef demanding food, and Yosef said, I will give you food on one condition. He told them to forsake the Avodah Zarah. He told them to make brachos and recognize the Rabbeinu Shalom. They said, we will not listen to you. Eventually he told them to circumcise themselves. They ran to Paro, and they started to complain. So Paro said, what do you want from me? Go to Yosef. And they said, we came to him, and he's demanding that we change our entire lifestyle. What right does he have to tell us what to do or what to believe in? Fools, answered Paro. He predicted that the 7 years of abundance would be followed by 7 years of hunger. Why didn't you stock food for 2 or 3 years? And their answer was, we did, but whatever we stored up decayed. And Paro said, don't you have any flour left? And they said, as soon as the hunger began, even the bread which was on the table became moldy. Now, here we come to the second part of our lesson, or really page 2. After you have the Siyata Deshmaya to read the simple directions in life and know what to do, then you have to understand that even in the simplest of directions, without the Rabbeinu Shalom, it doesn't work. You can reach for that raft. You can write the emes. You can soak your hands first. But in order for things to go easy, you still need the Rabbeinu Shalom. And this is really the second lesson that Yosef Atzadik teaches us. Don't be too smart for yourself. Learn how to read the compass that the Rabbeinu Shalom puts down in front of us, directing us to do what we have to do. Understand the simple messages in life, but never be too overconfident that the solution is so simple that it has to work, because ultimately without the Siyata Deshmaya, simple solutions don't work either. The key to finding the Siyata Deshmaya in the simple solutions in life is to understand that every solution requires tshuva. It requires saying to the Rebbeinu Shalom, I have a problem. I think I know what the answer to that problem is. I want to become a better person. Help me through this to become a better person. And as a result, you have bracha. If not, it doesn't help to pile up the food in the hole. It's going to become moldy anyway. The Sefer Nesivos Shalom explains that the Pagam of Mitzrayim was Erva Sa'aretz. Therefore the Pasuk says, Vatira of Kalaretz Mitzrayim L'Lechem. They were all hungry for bread. Everything rotted. The Mitzrayim were given to explain by Yosef that they were in mortal danger and that there was a solution. So they relied on the solution. But they never did tshuva. They never even attempted to reevaluate their lives. They never attempted to change Mitzrayim's reputation of Erva Sa'aretz. Yosef gave them the simple solution, but along with the simple solution came a demand for changing your lifestyle. Yosef explained to them that his withstanding his Nisayan is what directly resulted in his personal Ashivas and Malchus. Vayisapek, he held himself back. Vayoyma, and he said, Simu Lechem. There was a slanim of art Vayisapek, when the Yid has a kayach to hold back his personal temptations, and Taiva HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mashpia parnasa. Vayoymer, so Hashem says, Simu Lechem, place bread on his table. The two are directly connected. The more kayach a Yid has of Vayisapek to hold himself back, and not to be drawn into the passion of the moment, to withhold his temptations, to look for a higher lifestyle. So the more Vayomer Simu Lachem, the more there is a bracha that he should have parnas. And this is the message that Yosef gave to the Mitzrayim. Yosef told them, you're in danger. There is a simple solution. The simple solution will work, however, only if you understand that you need the Siyata D'Shmaya. And you will only get that Siyata D'Shmaya if you're willing to say to B'nai Shalom, I need help, I'm going to be better. I'm going to try to be a better person. The Mitzrayim weren't buying it, however. They were so hungry. They began to scream, we need bread. The Yemer Pari L'chol Mitzrayim explains the Nesiva Shalom, what are you yelling at me for? L'chol Yosef. What do we need Yosef for? So Yosef gave us the solution already. The Teretz says simple solutions don't work. It's only if you're going to do what he tells you to do. It's only if you're going to listen to his tshuva. I can't help you. I have no choice. You have to listen to Yosef. You see, whether you like it or not. You have to think about doing tshuva in order to be zeicha to see simple solutions, and then you have to do tshuva in order for those simple solutions to work. And if you understand this, the most complicated things in life can actually be solved in a simple fashion. Mikeitz, and so it came to be at the end of the 2 years, Pari has a dream, and the pasuk goes on to tell us what happened afterwards, which subsequently leads to Yosef's release from prison. Isn't this interesting, says the Beis Halevi? Shouldn't the pasuk have read the other way around? Pari had a dream, and Memela, because of the dream, he needed someone to interpret the dream, and so Yosef was taken out of prison, and as a result, completely freed, and he satisfied the king's needs. So it really should have been the other way. Pari had a dream, and Memela, it came to the end of Yosef's prison term. But no, the pasuk makes it very clear that that is wrong. That's not the way it happened. That's not the way anything happens. What happened over here was, it came to the end of the time that Yosef was supposed to be in prison. Because the amount of time that we are imprisoned, whether physically, whether we suffer emotionally, whatever restrictions we are confined to, it's bashed exactly how long we have to deal with that, how long we have to suffer. And when that time period is over, something is going to happen that is going to take us out, that is going to redeem us. But put it into perspective. Because it was the Himikach Nesayim Yom, because it was the end of the 2 years, the extra 2 years that Joseph had to stay in prison, therefore Pari had a dream. Dr. Beis Halevi, if you think about this, life can be a whole lot easier. Everything in life has a siba and a mesoivev. A siba means a reason, and the mesoivev is the apparent result of the reason, or the action that an individual took. Now, here's the way the world thinks, and here's what really happens, says the Beis Halevi. Suppose I go and I invest in a certain business. I invest time, money, effort, sleepless nights, and I cash in, and the business is a success. So, how would I view this? The siba, the reason the business was a success was due to all of my effort, and the Messiah, and all of this resulted in the creation of my now very admirable portfolio. Min Hashemayim was Bashet, you should make money. Whether that's good for you or not, we don't know. But Min Hashemayim was Bashet, you should make money. That's the Siba. Memela, there's a Messiah. Memela, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put you in a situation where you had this idea, where you had the courage, where you had the friends, or you had the advisors, and you went ahead and you did all the things that led up to the money. But it's not what you did that brought the money. It's because you were supposed to make the money, therefore you did all the things. The Medrash says, "Vahi mikeitz shenasayim yamim u'parei chaylim." The Medrash quotes a pasuk in the Yiddish that says Hashem had a determined amount of time and then put an end to the darkness. The Eibishter put an end to the allotted time that Yosef was supposed to stay in prison. And once that time came, then Pari had a dream. So again, it's not the dream that took Pari out. It was the end of time that Yosef had to stay in prison. And therefore, he had a dream. So there's the famous Marshal from the Chavetz Chaim, quoted in the Sefer Lekach Toiv after he explains to Sefer Levi. Man from the village came to the big train station for the first time. He's trying to speak to someone important over there. Can't figure out exactly who's who. There are many people in uniform running around, organizing. But there's one person who's standing over here. And he pulls on this string and blows a huge whistle. And then the train pulls out of the station. Blows another whistle, another train pulls into the station. So the villager figures that this man has to be Mr. Gross. He has to be the all-powerful over here. He must be head of the train company. He must be the CEO of the entire transportation throughout the entire country. Can you imagine the massive power this person has? He pulls a string and hundreds of train cars pull out. Pulls another string, hundreds of train cars pull in. The villager is awed by a human being controlling so much, having such koiches. He runs over to him and he bows down to his feet and he says, "Great and powerful leader of the railroads." The man looks at him and says, "What's with you?" He says, "Well, you're the head of all the railroads, aren't you? You are so powerful. I am so humbled by the control at your fingertips of..." Stop, the man says. "What are you talking about?" He says, "I'm just a minimum wage worker over here. And I have to blow the whistle before the train moves out to warn everybody, and blow another whistle before the train comes in to warn everyone. The one who actually controls the trains and decides on the schedules, he's sitting in some office someplace. You'll never be able to get to him." Now we, Baruch Hashem, have access to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to the one who actually controls everything. But the Rebbeinu Shalom does want us to put things into perspective. There is the illusion, there is the perception, and then there is the reality. The perception is that there are sibais and results of those sibais. The reality is that there are results of the sibais, and therefore there are sibais. If you think about this, your whole life is different. Let's say you're worried about something, really, really concerned about it, and you're trying to reach people that you feel could help you, and you can't reach them. They're not returning your call. They're not home. They're not available. They're on vacation. You're upset. You're upset at whom? You feel so angry, you feel so hurt, you feel so betrayed. By whom? By those people who could get you out of the trouble. Don't look at it that way. Turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom and understand that there is a gzeira over here that for a duration of time you have to experience this difficulty. And when that gzeira is over, then whether it's those people or other people or someone's dream, but whatever it takes to end the gzeira is going to be there exactly on time. If you think about it that way, you're no longer angry at those people who aren't returning your call. You're no longer frustrated or feeling lonely because there aren't enough people to support you. It has nothing to do with them. Address your concerns to the Bari Olam, to the one who decides on the schedules of the railroads. And memela, things will fall into place. How many times did this happen to you? The mail comes on Shabbos. Okay, you don't touch the mail on Shabbos. Shilas of Muktzah comes out of the Tchum, whatever the particular Shilas are in that respective place. But you glance at it. And then there's a letter there that worries you. A bill, a lawsuit, letter from the state tax department. Some things that you're worried about. Now, what do they want from me?
And you sit down with a Shabbos suit and you make Kiddush and you smile and you sing Zmiris and you say stories, but that letter is haunting you. You're not going to touch it. You're not going to look at it. It's Shabbos. And if you were really a Baal Madrega, the letter would completely disappear from your memory banks and will only come up after Havdalah. But you know and I know that's a lot easier said than done. And as you're laying in bed Shabbos afternoon, trying to rest up, after the chont and before your Shabbos afternoon shir, you say to yourself, why do these letters always have to come on Shabbos? Well, maybe the solution to that is don't look at your mail on Shabbos. But let's put that aside. He already looked. He can't do anything about it. He's tossing and turning and he says to himself, it always happens. These letters always come on Shabbos. Why do they come on Shabbos for? So finally, Matzah Shabbos comes and you open up the letter and you see it's addressed to the wrong address. They don't mean you, or it's a nuisance. It's nothing to worry about. And you begin to say to yourself, why? Why does this have to happen? Why is my luck so bad that these letters have to come, out of all the 6 days that letters are delivered, they have to come on Shabbos? Then you didn't get the Beis Halevi, if that's what you're thinking. You didn't have a difficult Shabbos because of the letter. It was Bashet Min HaShamayim that you should have a difficult Shabbos. You had an assignment, a test, to quench your fears and enjoy the Kiddush of Shabbos. So Mamela Kadosh Baruch Hu sent the letter. It could have been 10,000 other ways. It's not the letter. And if you think about it this way, the next time you're tossing and turning from right to left, you're saying, why does this letter have to come on Shabbos? You say to yourself, nothing to do with the letter. Let me think what I can do to be zeicha to a better Shabbos. I have to stop being Mispal Wednesday morning with that Lechuna Ran, and I should be zeicha to a better Shabbos. I have to bench slower. So when I say Ritzei, and I say the Bainish Shalom, over Tzayim Chaniach Lano Hashem Elokeinu Shaloi Sehei Tzara V'Yogan V'Yanocha B'Yomen Nechaseinu, I have to say that slower with much kavana. Let me see what I can do to take away this siba that somehow being tested on Shabbos. And the letter will become bottle, and the other problems will become bottle. Someone is causing you a tremendous amount of tzaras, and you're so angry, and you're so frustrated, you're so overwhelmed, you feel so helpless. Whatsoever you view him as a mesoyveh, not as a siba, he's not so threatening to you. Now, this is not a license of complacency. This doesn't mean the person can say, well, that's it, I'm quitting my job, I'm not working anyhow, my work has nothing to do with the results, let me get into my hammock in the morning, and I'll sip away at my coffee, and I'll look into a ma'aser bichel, and whatever has to happen is going to happen now. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to work, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to try, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to be organized, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to protect yourself. We know all of this. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to know that after all is said and done, it's not up to you whether you're successful. And that explains that Be'al Pian was sort of the mistake of Yosef Atzadik, and we have to understand that given the level of Yosef Atzadik's betacha, every little hair is amplified. When Yosef Atzadik said, do me a favor, Mr. Sar Mashkim, remember me, get me out of here, there was a mashu, a tiny, tiny little nakuda, a microscopic overemphasis on him being the reason for Yosef Atzadik to get out and not the other way around. That when the time comes, the time will come, and if it's Pashet for him to be the reason, he'll be the reason. If not, someone else will be. And we see that message in the dream itself. Paro's dream was that you had these 7 big, big cows that are swallowed up by these 7 emaciated-looking cows, and you can't even tell by looking at the cows that they swallowed the big ones. Like the pasuk says, "V'tavayna el kirbena, v'lo noida kivo el kirbena, u'mareyan rak asher betchil." Like the Sfas Emes, Paro's understanding of Golus in difficult times is that, look, in Hashemayim there are, he said, conflicting powers. There's a power of good and prosperity, and then there's a power of evil and hunger. In this dream, they were giving Paro a lesson. It's not the way it works, Paro. Even the difficult years, the years of Golus, the years of the emaciated cows, you know what gives them their koyach? The years of bracha. Were it not for the power of good, as you call it, being in these emaciated cows, they could not exist. There is Golus because there is a Gzeira of Golus, and the Gzeira of Golus comes from Shemayim, the same way the Gzeira of prosperity comes from Shemayim. King Parai, the message in your dream is, explains this Sfas Emes, that yes, the Bnei Yisrael will be under your reign, and they will be slaves to you, and they will work for you. But your whole koyach is the koyach of the Kedusha, the koyach of good, that is hidden someplace in this Golus. If not, you couldn't have any shlita on them, and you won't have any shlita on them 1 split second after the time is up. Skinny cows are misleading. It looks like they have power on their own. But you can't tell this is the Gzeir min Hashemayim unless you saw the dream and understood how the good went into the bad and waits to come out again. And there's a lesson in this for us as well, explains the Sfas Emes. During good days, a person is to stop and think and be mispal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the ha'aretz, the light of these days, should come within us, should be absorbed into our very essence, so that during difficult times, we can draw on these reserves to sustain ourselves. Generally speaking, says the Sfas Emes, before every Nisayon that a person is tested with, he was given advice and was given some good times or kaiches from before, and the purpose of that is for him to take it and to store it. Yosef Atzadik's great Mesiras Nefesh, to maintain the levels of Tahara in seemingly impossible situations in Mitzrayim, created an atmosphere of Kedusha and Tznius for Klal Yisrael during their many, many years of Golus in Mitzrayim. They themselves didn't know where they got the koiches in this Golus to be able to attain such a high level of Kedusha. But it came from Yosef Atzadik. Yosef Atzadik and his Kedusha was absorbed into the very essence of Klal Yisrael. And Yosef Atzadik understood that message in the dream as well. That he has to teach Klal Yisrael how to take the good days and use it as a reserve to carry them over through the difficult times. A person has to live his Shabbos thinking, I must absorb this Kedusha into me so that I can make it to the week. And this is ever more so true for the Yom Tov of Chanukah. Almost all the other Yom Tovim come at the beginning or in the middle of the month. Chanukah is the only Yom Tov that begins at the end of the month. The end of the month is not such a opportune time, generally speaking. The Ramah says not to make weddings at the end of the month, although there are different opinions as to what is considered the end of the month. Chanukah starts Chafei Kislev. Why? The Bnei Yissaschar explains that Teves is so dark. The winter and its long, dark nights, which represents the Golus, the difficulties, the Hastaras Panim, the inability of being able to understand. The darkness is so overwhelming that Chazal wanted us to have the gift of Chanukah, Dafka over here, the end of Kislev shining into Teves. The Zohar HaKadosh says that Teves belongs to the month of Esau. Klal Yisrael in Golus. However, we are taught over here how to take the light of Chanukah and to keep it in us, to give us the chizik and the emunah and the power to endure, to be mechazik ourselves. Sometimes a koyach that we ourselves can't figure out where it comes from, but it has been stored from beforehand. The days of Chanukah store up enough emunah and simcha for us to help us get through the dark winter. Chanukah represents the Or HaGanis, the hidden light, the light of clear emunah and belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we have to breathe in enough air to keep in our tanks so that this supports us during times that things don't seem to make sense to us. The Gemara says in Masechtas Shabbos that if someone has Limud HaTorah, he has a house. But if you have Yiras Shamayim, then you have the keys to get into that house. If you have Torah and no Yiras Shamayim, you have a house, but you don't have an entrance into the house, and therefore your house doesn't do you a whole lot of good. Zaktas Sfas Emes B'Shem Z'Chedush Yerin. Where are we supposed to put the Erev Chanukah? The Gemara says, Mitzvah L'niach Al Pesach Beisai Me B'Chutz. By the opening of your door on the outside. The Erev Chanukah is the Yiras Shamayim. The Erev Chanukah is the Emunah. The Erev Chanukah are the keys for us to be able to get in and understand what Limud HaTorah, what Yiddishkeit, what Emunah, what everything is all about. And once we come in through Chanukah, then we're inside and sheltered even in the dark winter. Even as Chazal tell us that the Lamed Vav Neiros, the total of 36 Neiros, that we light on Chanukah corresponds to the 36 Mesechtes in Shas. So Chanukah is a hachana for Limud HaTorah. It's the doorway in. And we'll speak along more practical terms how Chanukah relates to learning and what you're supposed to think about during the Neiros in our Yaakov segment, the Yezra Shem Yisrach. But for now, one more concluding thought. The Medrash says Yosef Mishaloi Nitnulai. Yosef was Zaychet and Malchus. He earned it on his own. The Fasemus explains, because Yosef HaTzadik took nature, the nature that should have driven him to a Dvar Aveira, and he was Machniya himself, with unbelievable kaiches of restraint. Therefore, Midah Keneged Midah, that very same nature around him would also have to subjugate itself to Yosef HaTzadik. In other words, Yosef controlled himself, therefore, the nature around him would also have to stop and subject itself to Yosef's control. That was the Malchus that Yosef HaTzadik was Zaycha to, and it also represents the degree of Malchus that anyone can be Zaycha to by employing the same method.
This shiur is distributed by Koladas, 11 Stay Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Post Box 57035.